Hi there, this is Brent here, his personal coach. It's been a long time since I made a video. I'm sorry. I'm here now. A lot of stuff I've been going through. A lot of life, a lot of updates, a lot of really going balls to the wall about life, like really kind of giving it all the effort that I have, and going through a lot of like effort and collapse. So like just doing everything and then running out of steam, and then doing everything and then running out of steam, and something kind of interesting happens when like I'll go through like this burst of effort, like so it'll be like either habits, whether it be for like personal health or business or what have you, and then I'll run out of steam, and then as I run out of steam, I'll get to this point where it's like with all the effort gone, I'm just kind of sort of sitting here and looking at this mountain of everything that is in front of me for me to do. And so that includes both the tasks for the day and also just, all of my life tasks and everything that I hope to accomplish this year. And the whole thing just becomes sort of this daunting mountain that just seems to get more steep every time I attempt to surmount it. And just yesterday, Sunday, I kind of showed up at my workspace and I was getting ready to work and do some things, and something kind of interesting happened where I found myself standing outside of it, and and that was like the first impression that I got. I'm standing outside of it, and so I'm like, okay, what is it that I'm standing outside of? And what I realized is that a lot of why I do everything, it's motivated by this desire for everybody else's wellness, and not in the wholesome. I don't mean that in the wholesome way. I mean it in the sense that in my imagination, I always imagine people that love me concerned about me, because I made a couple key decisions in my career to kind of not pursue like a really traditional sort of corporate path, and I really wanted to go my own way, being an entrepreneur and being a coach and working with clients one on one and rendering services right with a person and doing my own marketing and really getting my hands in that kind of process. And it was always really valuable to me, but it's kind of like a hard route as compared to, say, kind of entering into a job at entry level in a big company and kind of like, working your way up, and, you can become quite wealthy that way. And so my loved ones, would, at least they used to, and I don't know if they still do anymore, they would kind of worry about me and my personal choices. And I would always feel responsible for that. And I've always felt this strong desire to become successful and wealthy as quickly as I possibly can, so that I can validate myself to the people who are worried about me, so that they no longer need to be worried about me. And so that's kind of one main thing. And another main thing is that, like, I always find myself to be somewhat uncomfortable around people. And not just anybody, but people who I already know, people with whom I have a history. And the reason for that is that I am I kind of just came out of the factory as a really empathetic, empathic, sensitive kind of guy. I'm always kind of feeling everybody's energies and feeling the energies around me, and if anybody is in conflict or if anybody's not feeling okay with themselves, then it I would historically make that my responsibility. Like, I would make it my responsibility to make them feel okay and stuff. And the challenge that I would sometimes run into is if, like, I meet somebody, and if they're nervous, and if I can't help them relax or help them feel good, or if there's something about me that kind of makes them nervous or whatever, then it kind of creates this feedback loop where I start to kind of like freak out and get really kind of awkward, and it makes me want to leave. And so, say I'm at a party with people, and I'm in a party, a house party, and I feel everybody's kind of like uncomfortable, jittery energy. You know, if I can't do something about it, then it just makes me just want to go, because it just creates this feedback loop of unpleasantness. So anyways, so like I bring up these two things because both of them kind of are about my need to maintain everybody else's state and my needing to get to a certain place so that everybody can feel okay. And I've kind of set up myself so that everybody's okayness is a condition of my own okayness. And if you recall, I made this one video, which is probably one of my favorite videos that I ever made. It's called Unconditional Wellness. And I talk about how we put a lot of conditions in between ourselves and our feeling of being okay, feeling like just kind of all right as ourselves. So basically what I want to get at, what I'm sort of angling at, is that I'm sitting here on the Sunday morning and I feel this sense of failure and the sense of disappointing people and the sense of letting people down and the sense of letting down myself and the sense of not doing enough and not being enough and the fear that I'll never be totally fulfilled as a person. Like, really heavy shit, right? But it's shit that we, like, all of us go through. Like, if you're listening to this, it's very likely that you go through something like this as well. And like all this is coming up, and I just, and then it just occurred to me all at once that all of these kind of negative, painful affirmations are not totally real. They're not totally accurate. Because take, for example, this, this thought, like, I'm disappointing everybody and I'm failing myself and failing my life. Like, it comes into my head and it kind of like looms heavy and kind of insists that it's true when this sort of thought occurs to me. But it's also not totally true. It's just a thought. And I know this. It's just kind of a thought that's passing through my consciousness. It's not really real. Like, because when you look at it from the most intelligent and the most objective standpoint, how can you possibly fail at your life? How could a leaf fail at its life? Or how could a rock? How could an otter, a sea otter, fail? You can't, because, like, all that's ever possible for a person in any given moment is just to show up to the moment and just be whatever the moment requires and at any given moment. And that's just about it. And you can make certain career choices and like that does, you can sort of plan for your future and act in an intelligent way that kind of, brings about more success in the future. And that part is there. It's there, but it's not as real and as valid as the success that comes from just being here as the fullness of yourself in this moment. There's no really any such thing as being a failure. And if anybody's disappointed by you, it's not your problem. It's their problem. It's the person who is disappointed, because disappointment is a part of life. It's just an experience that we go through, and it's not that bad. It's not even all that unpleasant. Disappointment is just what it is. It's just an experience like any other experience. So it's not real and it's not valid to say that, you're failing and, you're not doing enough and you're not enough. It's false. It's not true. And so we all know this intellectually, what I'm saying, but there's a certain leap of faith that's required to step beyond, because if you feel like you're a failure and I say, dude, you're not a failure, you would say, yeah, I know, but it still feels like I am. And what that means is that you're hedging your bets. You're on both sides of the fence at once. You're kind of neither here nor there. You're intellectually sold, but you're emotionally kind of still in the fear. And so in order to get your other leg over the fence so that you can really know what you know, really know that you're not a failure, really know that all is well, really know that everything is on track and all is fine, and really know that your life is valid and that you're complete. You are essentially complete as a person, and there's nothing in you that's lacking and nothing's wrong with you. There is faith that's required, because faith is what is required to enter into something you suspect is true, but you won't know until you're there. There's no safety net. There's no bridge. It's a jump. It's a leap of faith. That's what faith is. And so what I did on this Sunday morning was I gave myself some faith. I offered faith that all is well. And then I popped out of the matrix of suffering, my own matrix of suffering. And I realized that it became clear all at once that I've been operating my whole life from this matrix of suffering. So what I mean by this is I've accepted as gospel certain tenets, such as you have to work in order to become successful. You're not fulfilled until you accomplish things. You're not okay as you are. You don't have enough yet. Like, these are kind of like basic sort of principles that create a matrix of suffering. And if you accept them as true, then you enter into these frames and you operate through suffering as your life. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. And that's how you create your pain matrix, your suffering matrix. And then your life becomes nightmares. And because you're constantly manifesting life from these very basic frameworks that are just suffering in and of themselves. So you exit the matrix of suffering by just taking all of your not enoughness and not good enoughness and just step outside of it. Now, a tip for this is pay attention. If it's your desire to exit your own matrix of suffering, pay attention to these moments, these brief intervals between going to bed and going to sleep, and the interval between waking up and kind of getting out of bed. Because there's a little slice of experience in there. If you look for it, and you can do this, it's not too difficult. There's a little slice of experience where you're awake, not asleep, awake, but you haven't picked up your life. You haven't dived back into your pain matrix. And what it is, it's this experience of being awake without like this heavy burdened sense of self. And if you can look for that, then you can remember that it's actually possible to live like that. You and the matrix of suffering are not the same thing. Or rather, life and the experience of suffering are not the same thing. They're actually two things. And it's possible to have life without suffering. And when you realize this, then the next step after that would be to create a meditation practice. And this is another thing that I'm kind of assuming about you if you're watching this, that you are at least familiar with meditation, you're sold on the idea of meditation, and you've tried developing a meditation practice, and you either have one or you don't, but you really want to have one because you know the benefit is there. Let this be your meditation practice. I myself, I'm actually enrolled in a course with Adya Shanti, the speaker that I really admire, and it's really, really wonderful, and I'm really just rediscovering afresh the profound benefit of meditation. Let me just check the time real quickly because I have a thing in 5 minutes. So actually, I'll have to wrap this up. Meditate for 5 minutes, maybe today or maybe tomorrow or whatever. And as you meditate, just become aware of awareness itself. Just become aware of the fact that you are aware. There's a little bit of a trick to it because the awareness is the subjectivity. It is that in you which is looking out. And so if you rest your imagination on some sort of an object like, oh, this is what I am, this is the awareness, that can't be it because that is what awareness is looking at. The experience of awareness is more like, like in our day-to-day activities, we're like looking at this and looking at this and this and this. And it's like, and meditation is just allowing that attention to come back to here. So it's just a state of awareness, just awareness right here, not on anything or of anything, just awareness itself. And be here as your meditation practice. Because if you can do that, then that is a different way of you withdrawing your attention from the matrix of suffering. Just being able to differentiate between experience and the matrix of suffering is enough to come out of it, because the matrix of suffering, it gets its steam, it gets its energy, and it kind of creates more of itself when you mistake life for it. And that's how you offer all of your creative power to it. And then you're creating through it and from it and creating all the nightmares and so forth. And that's kind of like how it goes. And it's somewhat parasitical in that way. You could kind of look at it like that. And so you don't need, so in order to get out of it, you don't have to fight it or resist, because that kind of ends up making more of it anyways. But instead what you do is you just become aware of it. You just look at it. You just look at how it operates. And you do that either by doing what I mentioned about like the moment between sleep and getting out of bed, that kind of thing, or meditation and allowing your sense of awareness to come back here. you start to just come out, and you'll recognize it the way I did. You'll recognize that you're doing it properly, because you'll get this sense of like, oh my God, like life is really sweet, but there's like a fear that pulls you back in. There's like this, like it'll say something like, oh no, there's no time for that. It'll say that, like, or like, no, it's not safe to put down all of your heavy burdens, your heavy sense of self. Like if you put down your burdens for even a second, then you run this risk of like something terrible is going to happen. There's going to be some kind of collapse or some kind of emergency. That's how you know you're being lied to by your own mind. So you don't need to believe it. You can, and if it feels good, this is what I do. You can set like 10 minutes aside where like you a priori say, it is now safe to totally let down all of my burdens and heaviness and responsibility and sense of self and my whole campaign on life. It's okay. It's safe to put it all down, all of it. And then you spend these 10 minutes just letting it all fall away, let it all fall away. And remember what it's like to be yourself without being burdened. This is a tricky area of conversation, because I imagine if I were speaking to you live right now, then what would happen is your own sense of burden and your campaign of life and your sense of not good enoughness would come out to its defense. And it would start saying things like, well, like, I can't just live like this. I can't just be here. Like it's, there's stuff to do, and it's a hard world, and you have to get out there and you have to grind, and you start getting your, like, the core principles of the matrix of suffering start asserting themselves as true. And so what I want to recommend to you is that just question everything, and really question your assumption that life must be difficult, in that there's like a lot to do before you can finally feel okay as yourself. And at the very, very bare minimum, familiarize yourself with your experience outside of your campaign on life, your matrix of suffering. Because if you could do that, then at minimum, you start bringing in all this fresh creativity, this fresh new insight. Instead of just recycling old thoughts all over, you can finally allow new experience to come in, and that will renew and reinvigorate what you're doing. And it'll often offer you like the solutions that you're looking for in these problems that you've been working with. So that's it. That's kind of what I came here to say. I have to jump off now. I hope you're well, and I intend to make more videos for you. I really enjoy this, and that feels really good for me. So that's there. My final note is that what I'd like to offer now are free intro sessions to you. So if you and I have never had a chance to work together before, please take up my offer for a, what do we call them? A free release, escape, no. Whatever, we'll come up with a name for it later. But I want to offer you a free session with me one-on-one so that I can show you how to come out of your own matrix of suffering. And so what I'll do is I'm going to put a link in the description to my calendar page. And what you can do is you can just click through and just look in the calendar and just take any open vacancies that suit you. It'll be adjusted for your time zone. If you see nothing there, then it means I'm all full because I'm super popular. And then what you can do is just send me an email or send me a message or a comment, or just get in touch with me if you want to get a session. I'll put you on the waiting list so you can know when like new opportunities open up. Feel totally free to take me up on this. I'm doing this because I love to. And this is how I find paying clients too. So the option is there. If you're like, oh my God, this work is so good, I want to work with you on the regular, we can arrange that too. That should be no problem. That is all I got for you. Take care. Goodbye.